Hello and welcome to Anatomy of Book and Book Chapter References, the third video in the series about APA citation formatting. Let's get right to it by dissecting this sample reference for a book. We'll walk through the elements from beginning to end and talk about some of the finicky formatting, and then afterward you'll have a chance to quiz yourself to make sure you got it all. First up, the book's authors. These are formatted as last name, comma, first initial, period. Second initial, if there is one, period. If there are two initials, be sure to put a space between them. If there's more than one author, you follow the first author's initial with a comma and start all over again with the next author. Then before the last author's name, whether it is the second or the 20th, you include an ampersand, which is that funny little and symbol. Next is the year of publication. For books, it will always only be the year, even if the month and date are available, and you put that in parentheses, followed by a period. Then comes the title of the book. If you're familiar with article citations, you'll notice it's formatted a little differently from the title of a journal. It is in italics, like a journal title, but the capitalization is different. Capitalize the first letter of the first word of a book title, and then the first letter of the first word after the colon, if that applies. So in this case, rehabilitation is capitalized, and then principles is capitalized, and everything else is lowercase. Of course, you would make an exception for proper nouns and leave those capitalized. If there are multiple editions of a book, you include which edition you used in parentheses right after the book title, and then insert a period after that. If it is the first edition of a book, you leave that information out entirely, and the period goes directly after the book title. Finally, you end with the name of the publisher, leaving off any superfluous words like publishers or Inc. in their name. Notice that we don't include the publisher location. That's a change for the 7th edition of the APA manual. And then, of course, the whole thing ends with a period. Let's move on to a chapter in an edited book. I'll pause for a minute and talk a bit about that. When you use a book where each chapter has its own author or authors, you always cite individual chapters and very rarely cite the entire book. You do that because you want to acknowledge the authors most responsible for the information, and in that case, it is the author or authors of the chapter, not the editors who brought all of those chapters together. So even if you use multiple chapters in an edited book, you would cite each one of them separately. Okay, now let's go. As usual, the first element of the reference is the author or authors. In this case, the chapter authors, with the usual formatting. Last names, initials, periods, ampersand, the whole works. Again, the publication date comes next, and again for books, it is only the year. It's in parentheses with a period after it. Next up, the chapter title. Notice it is formatted just like an article title. It is in plain text, meaning no italics, and only the first letter of the first word is capitalized. And if there were a colon, the first letter of the first word after the colon. You end that section with a period as well. Now it really begins to look a little different. The next piece of info in the reference is the editor or editors. It's the usual, initials and last names, but in reverse order, with the initial coming before the last name. You use the ampersand again, but you don't separate with commas unless there are more than two editors. Then you let everyone know who these people are by labeling with capital EDS period or ED period for a single editor, and that goes in parentheses. Then comes a comma, and the book title. This uses the same formatting as an authored book title, so notice the italics and capitalization. Just like with a book, if there are multiple editions, you include which edition you used, but you also add the page range of the chapter in those parentheses, labeled with a PP period. Last but not least, the publisher name, again leaving off all of those superfluous words, and ending it all with a period. Let's review some of the trickier bits of these citations. Okay, first, remember to always cite individual chapters when each one is authored separately. Next, titles. Chapter titles are formatted like article titles, plain text with first word capitalization, and first word after the colon, naturally. Book titles are not formatted like journal titles, however. They are italicized, true, but they use that same first word capitalization. So just the first letter of the first word of a book title is capitalized, and the one after a colon if that applies. Plus, in both cases, you leave any proper nouns capitalized. All right, let's go on to the extra info. Include the edition information after a book title only if there are multiple editions. For if you use the first edition or there is only one edition, you leave that information out. And then for chapters, you include a page range. Finally, leave off the publisher location, but absolutely include the publisher name. So that concludes Anatomy of Book and Book Chapter References. If you'd like to test your knowledge, please take the brief quiz that follows this video in the module. Then, next up, we'll walk through what a reference list entry for a website looks like. All of the component parts and formatting as usual. See you there.